Hi again everybody, welcome to my latest video. Well, this one's going to be a little bit different than what I normally do. Since I got a lot of questions spread out amongst multiple videos of mine that I've posted over the past year, asking about the tools that I use, the tools and the equipment actually, that I use in making those videos, I decided I might as well just make a video and go over them. So what I've laid out on the table in front of me are all of the tools that I use. Now, some of these tools you've actually seen me use in one video or another. Others, you may not have actually seen it, they've been a little bit behind the scenes, and yet a third group of them will be shown in future videos. So I'm going to go over each one of these separately and let you see what it is. Well, this one here, you've seen before. It is my soldering iron. Now, my channel, as you may have noticed, if you watch more than a couple of videos, it's dedicated to electronics and computers. So I like equipment that has embedded computers in them. And this soldering iron, believe it or not, has a dedicated computer chip built into it that's actually running a program. That's how it's keeping track of the temperature, and it can display it properly. So if I set this at different temperatures, actually running a program off of a chip that can't be modified, it's an embedded system. So all of the work here, the blinking of the lights, the displaying of the digital display is all done by a little microprocessor. Now this tool you've seen me use a couple of times. This is the one that can check the wattage drawn by any piece of equipment plugged into it. It then in turn is plugged into the outlet. Well, it can do the voltage, it can do the amps, it can do the watts. The watts are what I generally am focused on. So when I plug a computer into here, I want to see how much power it's drawing from the wall outlet. And it helps you scope out the size of the power supply that you may need. Now this tool I've talked about, and I'm going to actually show another form of it, which I did talk about, but I don't think I've ever shown how to use it. This is a power supply tester. After I go over all of them in summary, I'm going to show certain ones actually being used, and this is one of them. If you don't want to use the tester, you just want to activate the power supply, I've talked about this. It's a little jumper that has a little jumper in place between two specific pins. And this plugs into the power supply, and it thinks that the motherboard is a real motherboard because it sees this jumper here, and the power supply will then come on. So then if you wanted to test a closed loop water cooling system, after you put the whole thing together, you don't want to turn the computer on yet, but you just want to get the pumps going. Well, you connect the pumps to the power supply, and then you connect this to the power supply. And when you plug the power supply in and activate its breaker on the back, it will actually start the pumps, and it'll keep running for as long as this is connected in. Now this one I have not used yet, but I will. It is actually a temperature tester. Now this came out of a regular home repair store for welding, so I could check what the temperature of the metal was that I was actually working on. But it has a little LCD display, and again, another embedded microprocessor. So if I were to press this trigger, let's point it at this table, you will see displayed on it the temperature. It has a little laser light that has come onto the table and checking the temperature there, and it displays the temperature here. Now if I pick something hot, like this soldering iron, which I've had on for a while now, and I put it on the soldering iron, we have a totally different reading on that. And it gets hotter as you go further down onto the tip of it. So it actually is measuring the heat that is produced by putting the laser pointer right on it. I can turn that off now. Now this one you have seen me use as well. This is a tachometer. So if you want to see how fast something is spinning, usually a fan, then you put this tachometer on it and it will count how many revolutions per minute. You put these little reflective tapes, a little piece of it, and then you point this, which also has a laser pointer on it, you point this at the reflective tape, and it will display the RPMs. Here's another one you haven't seen me use yet. I've used behind the scenes, and in future videos I will. This is a dB meter. It actually has a tripod holder to it, and it has a sound sensor. Now this is an older version of it, but it's very accurate. When you turn it, you have to pick the range that you want. It's an older technology, but it also has a microprocessor in it. So right there it's showing the dB of my voice as I'm talking here. If I stop talking, it'll go down. And if I stop talking again, it will. And if I go ahead and make a lot of noise, or I make some severe noise, the dB level will actually go up. When it's out of range, it'll show here, and then you have to pick the next scale on it. Let's see, the lowest one is 60, so it's from 0 to 60 dB. Then it goes to 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, 120, and then off. Then we have a general digital voltmeter. Now this particular one is very expensive. When I say very expensive, it's about $150 when I bought it. It does almost everything. It can check voltages, atmospheric pressure, it can check diodes and transistors and capacitors, it can check temperature in general, dB level as well. It has a little dB sensor on it as well, but that's not as accurate as the other one I showed you. It can also check light levels in terms of lux the light was. There's a scale for that. All the way up to amperage. You have to put probes in it, depending on whether you're connecting to a low amperage or a high amperage. Now, what do I use this for? Primarily, only two scales. That's the voltage level. So if I wanted to measure the level of output from something on the motherboard, I could just change this thing to here. It's an automatically sizing, and it'll tell you exactly what it is in voltage. It'll change the scale as appropriately. I also use it quite often for ohms. So if I wanted to check out how much something actually conducts electricity, which is very important, sort of a continuity checker, then you put this thing on the ohm scale, which is right there. You see the omega scale right there in orange? That's the ohm scale. So you'd put it here, and it even has a beep that you can turn on if you'd like. Put this here, and if I then short these two probes out, it'll show that we went to 0 ohms. When I have it like this, it's an infinite. 0L, infinite. So if you wanted to check to see whether a wire, especially like front panel wires or other wires that you are not sure are properly connected, that's an ohm meter. The ohm meter part of this is what you would use. Now, you don't need one this expensive. You can actually go to some place like Harbor Freight, pay $5 and get a little one that just does voltage in ohms. And it does both AC and DC. This one does as well, depending on which one of the plugs you connect it to. Now this you've seen me use, but I didn't explain it in any detail. This is a rangefinder. I used to use it when I played golf quite often. Now I can't really show you through the camera here what the screen looks like. So if you hit this, it actually will check the range. You press this button here. Once you have it, it also puts out a laser through this one lens here. It'll tell you what the range is. I'll display on the screen here what that looks like when you look through the eyepiece. It's not meant for close distances like this. It's meant for distances of a minimum of 6 yards or 18 feet. Then I have a tool. Now, this has been behind the scenes a lot. It's a nut driver, and it's actually the one that's used to do the studs on the case. So it's a 3/16 nut driver. Very handy to have if you're going to have to move those studs around or you have to install them for the first time. This really helps you get the studs in place and properly tightened. The tips actually change. I just happen to have the 3/16 tip on it. You can put screwdrivers and nut drivers of all sizes. Now we get into one that I'm going to have to show you on my test bench. This one I've never used on the camera, but I may. And it is a post indicator. It has the ability to plug into the modern motherboards, PCI or PCI-E slots. That's what this part here, or the older ones, the ISA, which you're not going to find anymore. I still have ISA connectors on a really old computer, but no modern computer will have an ISA connector. And this will display for you what the post codes are. It displays for you in order the last two post codes that it saw on these displays. So you see the next to last one here on the left and the final one here. And if you did not post properly, if you don't hear the beep that comes from the speaker, if your motherboard happens to have one or you've installed one, it would give you a code, and then there's a manual that comes with it where you look up what the codes are. Now you have to go by the motherboard, so you have to also go into your motherboard and find out what the codes mean for that particular BIOS that's on that motherboard. Every one is different. This is the ones that are the two most common legacy BIOSes that they had. One was called the Award and one was called AMI. Most modern BIOS on the motherboard are derived from those, so they tend to be very close to it. So this is a very handy little tool, and I'll show you how to use that in the next part of this video. Okay, the first thing I'm going to show is two things. I'm going to show this tester that will be used to turn a power supply on, and then I'll show this tester, which will actually test to see how it's functioning. First of all, let me turn it on as it is. If we turn it on now, I will get nothing. You don't see the fan turning. You don't see nothing active on it whatsoever. If I plug this into the 24-pin connector here, you plug this in like this, and then I turn it on, the fan is actually turning right now. know if you can see that, but the fan is definitely turning. The air is going through it. It did not do that until I put this connector on it in order to force it to think that it's connected to a motherboard. So now at this point, I could connect any of these other connectors up for some other purpose. So let me turn this off again, using that little switch there. Turn it off, fan is stopping. I'll take this connector off. Just to show you again, if I turn it on, fan does not turn. Now the other way I can do it is I take this tester, and it has a connector up for the same thing, for the main 24-pin connector, 20 plus 4, and I connect this up to the power supply. It will act just like that connector. So when I turn this on, the fan should start turning, and it does. But in addition to that now, we have the display, and the display is telling us what voltages are present, what voltages are absent. And you can see right now it's missing 12 volts. It has an L.L. It is showing the other voltages, and it's beeping as well, which means something is wrong with the power supply. If I then take the 12 volt connector that's here, one of these 12 volt connectors, which is, meant for the motherboard, and I plug it in over here, see what happens? The beeping has stopped, and now what does it say? 12 volt supply is at 11.9. So all the voltages are now present. So that's what this tester will do for us. It only will work really if one of the power outputs is actually dead. If it's an intermittent power supply, as I've said in my power supply videos, you will not know that. So that's these two test equipment. Turn it back off. It took a while to cycle down. Okay, now here is my test bench that I made a few episodes back, and on it I have my old PC, my Intel motherboard that I pulled out of the really old PC that goes back to my second video I've made on this channel. And what I now have done is I put it on here just to demonstrate a couple of the test equipment that I've shown today. First of all, I've gone ahead and put a reflector on the CPU fan. There's an actual reflector over here, right here. A piece of the reflecting tape, that is. And I will put in this board once I show you how this would work. So let me do the RPMs of that fan first. I've shown this before, but I want to show it again. I have my RPM meter here present. So what I'll do is I'll turn this on, and then I will do a test. And this thing is showing, see here if we can get a good shot of it here. There we go. Almost 2,800 RPMs, 27, 75, 62. It's reflecting off that reflector on that fan. I don't know if you heard it, but the thing did beep. The motherboard has on it an actual speaker built into it. So it's already identified that and has beeped to indicate that it did post properly. If it didn't post, you may not hear the beep, or you may hear it continuing to beep in some code, because this board does not have a display to show you what the codes are. However, let me turn it off again, and let me put this little card in that I showed you a moment ago, and I'll just put it in one of the PCI slots. That's free. Let me prop this up a little bit so you can see the display here, and then I'll turn it on again. It's going through all the codes of the power on test. Then it stops at the last two codes. It did beep, so it considers this a successful boot. You look up these codes in this book first, or you could look them up based upon the motherboard. What is a 38 and what is a 37? Well, I already looked them up. It's because I don't have a mouse and keyboard connected. That's why it stopped at those tests. I do have a video card. If I didn't have a video card in it, it may have stopped earlier, as one example. Also, I put the watt meter on it to show you what that looks like. So if you look at the watt meter, what's it say? It says we are at about 102 watts right now. That's being drawn by this motherboard and all of the stuff that I have connected to it, which includes a hard drive. I do have a hard drive connected, 250 gigabyte hard drive. I have these cards, of course, including a video card. The CPU, of course, that's drawing a lot. And the other stuff, the memory, would draw some as well. Anyway, that shows how you could use a card like this. They don't cost much. I'll put it down in the bottom of this video in the notes section, but I wound up buying this one from Newegg. So those are how I use that test equipment. And then finally, let me show you a most critical tool. This is not either electronic or microprocessor based at all. A good set of screwdrivers, all different sizes. They are high quality tempered steel tips, magnetic, and that's important to understand. They are magnetic. that concludes the tools that I wanted to show you. Okay, that concludes my video on the tools, accessories, and equipment that I use when I make my YouTube videos. In a future video, I may actually cover all of the camera and lighting equipment that I use. Some of it you've already seen, but not all of it. So it'll be interesting to take a look at that. Now, this video was inspired by questions. Mostly questions, unfortunately, that I got through email, and I responded to every one of them, related to certain types of tools they either saw or how I did certain things and what I used to do those certain things in the video. So that's what inspired it. It would be great if those questions had just been put as questions to the videos, the applicable videos, because then it would have been organized appropriately, because sometimes it's hard for me to tell which question goes with which video. Also, when I answer it, everybody will be able to see the answer. They'll be able to see the question and the answer, and I think that would be helpful to everybody. And if you got anything out of this video that you found useful in any way, please do me a favor. My head will pop up here in a moment on the corner. Click on it, follow along, and subscribe. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe, and you won't be bothered unless you also pick notifications. So anyway, thanks for watching. I look forward to giving you more videos soon. Take care.